The world had been quiet for many years. After the Great Silence, everything that once connected humanity to the sky was gone. The satellites had stopped orbiting, the night sky no longer shimmered with moving stars, and communication across the world had faded into whispers of memory. The once great cities now lay in shadows, and small human colonies struggled to survive, isolated and fearful. People spoke of the silence as if it were a curse. They built small communities in the ruins of old cities, lighting fires at night instead of electric lamps. No one dared to look up for too long, because something about the stillness above the clouds felt alive, as if the stars were watching, waiting for something to return. Among these broken remnants of civilization lived a young scientist named An. He was quiet, thoughtful, and different from the others. While most people avoided anything related to the old world's machines, An searched for them. He spent his days in an abandoned underground research lab, hidden beneath layers of dust and time. It was one of the few places left with traces of ancient technology. The walls were cracked, the lights flickered faintly, and the air was heavy with a scent of metal and rust. Yet for An, it felt like home. He believed that somewhere in the forgotten data of the old world lay an answer, a reason for the silence, and maybe a way to end it. One evening, as the red glow of sunset faded beyond the mountains, An sat alone in front of a dimly lit console. The old computer screen blinked weakly, its systems half dead but still breathing. He had been scanning old data fragments for months, collecting broken codes and corrupted memories from what was once Earth's digital sky. Most nights, he found nothing but static, old records of lost people, unfinished messages, or data too damaged to read. But that night was different. As he ran another search command, something appeared on the screen. A strange pattern of numbers, repeating in a rhythm that felt almost alive. At first, he thought it was an error. But as he watched, the code began to shift, forming symbols that didn't belong to any known language. An leaned closer. His heart started to beat faster. The console's lights flickered brighter as if reacting to the code itself. The name of the file blinked at the top of the screen, human_code_0A. His breath caught. He had never seen anything like it. The data seemed ancient, older than the silence, maybe older than human civilization itself. For a long moment, he hesitated. He knew that running unknown code from the old world could be dangerous. Stories said that many before him had vanished after awakening old systems. But curiosity was stronger than fear. Just one scan, he whispered to himself. He pressed a key. At first, nothing happened. The screen went dark, and for a second, An thought the system had died completely. Then, slowly, lines of glowing blue text began to flow across the screen. The sound of faint static filled the room, rising and falling like distant breathing. The temperature in the lab dropped, and the metal floor began to tremble softly under his feet. An stepped back, eyes wide. The air was alive with electricity. The old monitors around him turned on by themselves, showing the same moving code, thousands of lines repeating over and over like a digital heartbeat. Outside, the wind grew stronger. The ground vibrated. People in the nearby colony felt it too, cups shaking, walls creaking, fires flickering out. Children cried while elders whispered that the sky was waking. An ran out of the lab, his heart pounding. The air outside was colder than usual. He looked up. 4 years. The night sky had been still. No stars, no movement, only blackness. But now, faint light were appearing far above the clouds. At first, it was one light, then two, then dozens. They pulsed softly, like distant eyes opening after a long sleep. The silence that had ruled the world for generations was breaking. The colony people gathered outside, staring at the heavens. Fear and wonder mixed in their faces. Some knelt and prayed. Others pointed and shouted. An stood frozen, realizing that the code he had run wasn't just an old file. It was a signal. He didn't know what it had awakened, but it was massive, powerful, and alive. The lights in the sky began to move, forming slow patterns that looked almost like ships aligning in orbit. A low hum filled the air, deep and steady, as if the earth itself was exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. An felt both terrified and fascinated. He thought of shutting the system down, but it was too late. The signal had already spread through the airwaves, into the old satellite remains, and across the entire sky. The human code had been waiting for someone to find it, someone to call it back to life. And An, unknowingly, had done exactly that. Far away, beyond the clouds and atmosphere, something ancient stirred in the void. Giant metallic shapes that had drifted in silence for ages began to glow, their surfaces covered with faint blue patterns that looked like veins of light. The fleet that had once guarded humanity was waking from its long sleep. Systems reactivated, engines hummed to life, and sensors began searching the earth below. It was like the heavens themselves were remembering their purpose. Iron's knees felt weak as he whispered to himself, "What have I done?" His voice was lost in the wind. The lights above shimmered brighter, almost as if they had heard him. A beam of pale light broke through the clouds, illuminating the mountains and valleys below. The night had changed forever. Humanity had touched something it had long forgotten, and something far above the clouds had just woken up. The next morning, the world no longer felt the same. The air carried a faint vibration, like a low hum only the heart could feel. People in the colony did not sleep that night. They stayed awake, staring at the lights that now hovered far above the clouds, dozens of bright, motionless shapes glowing faintly in the dawn sky. For the first time in generations, the stars were moving again. Some said it was a miracle. Others whispered that it was a warning. An hadn't left the lab since it happened. His eyes were red from staring at the console all night. The code was still running, spreading through every old satellite network that still existed, jumping between broken connections that had been silent for years. He couldn't stop it now, even if he wanted to. The data had a will of its own. Lyra, his AI assistant, flickered on the screen beside him. Her voice was soft, almost human. "An," she said, "the code is rewriting everything. It's searching for something." He rubbed his temples. "Searching for what?" Lyra paused. "I don't know yet, but it's calling." Outside, the world was reacting in strange ways. Magnetic fields shifted, compasses spun without direction, and radio waves began to hum with faint, melodic sounds. Old, dead devices turned on by themselves, radios, speakers, even abandoned computers from the old world. They all repeated the same whisper in different tones and frequencies. Nobody could understand the language, but it felt human. In other colonies around the world, people saw the same lights. Panic spread fast. Some believed the gods had returned. Others feared the machines of the old world were coming back to punish them. Messages began to travel between settlements, voices filled with fear, confusion, and awe. No one knew what the lights were or where they came from. An, meanwhile, kept watching the data flow on his screen. The symbols from the human code had changed overnight. Now they looked like coordinates, locations across the globe. He zoomed in and gasped. The points were over old cities, places destroyed during the Great Silence. One of them was directly above his colony. The fleet, whatever it was, seemed to be scanning the earth. Lyra's tone changed, lower now, almost like she was thinking. "An, the signal coming from above, it contains human DNA patterns." He turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "It's matching genetic signatures," she replied. "It's reading humanity itself." A chill ran down his spine. "That's impossible. Those ships, those things, they shouldn't even know we exist anymore." Lyra hesitated before answering. "They know. They were made to know." The words hit him like thunder. The fleet was not alien. It was human, created by people long before the Great Silence. Iron remembered the stories his grandfather told him, tales of powerful ships built to protect Earth. But that one day, all of them had gone dark. No one ever knew why. Until now, the room suddenly flickered, and a sharp sound echoed through the speakers. It was a voice, broken, distorted, but clearly human. "Fleet, reactivation, sequence complete." Iron froze. The console lights brightened as more symbols appeared. Lyra's screen glowed brighter too. "The message is repeating," she said. "It's coming from orbit." He leaned closer, trying to listen. The voice was faint but full of emotion, like a memory pulled from the past. It said something again, clearer this time. Human code, verified, awaiting response. An's breath quickened. It wasn't just an automatic system. It was expecting someone to answer. He typed a quick command to stop the transmission, but the console didn't respond. The signal had locked itself. Lyra spoke again, her tone trembling for the first time. "On, I think they are talking to us." Outside, a low rumble rolled through the ground. The sky darkened, and the lights above the clouds shifted into formation, long lines of glowing shapes spreading across the horizon. The people in the colony screamed and ran for shelter. An rushed outside, heart pounding. Above him, the fleet moved like living constellations, each ship's core burned with blue fire. Beams of light swept across the landscape, scanning mountains, rivers, and the ruins of old cities. The sound that followed was deep and endless, like the voice of the planet itself. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The lights froze. The hum faded. The world went still. An looked around, confused. For a moment, it felt like the earth was holding its breath again. Then Lyra's voice came softly through his earpiece. "An, they found us." He turned his eyes to the sky. One of the ships was moving directly above his colony now. A narrow beam of light descended slowly, touching the ground near where he stood. The light didn't burn or harm. It pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. Inside it, faint symbols appeared in midday, the same ones from the human code. An whispered, barely breathing. "They're communicating." Lyra's voice quivered. "No, An, they're identifying." He stared in disbelief. The realization struck him hard. The fleet wasn't just waking up. It was searching for something, or someone. As the light flickered around him, An felt a strange warmth spread through his body, as if the code inside the machines recognized him. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what was happening. But deep inside, he felt a truth he didn't want to believe. The human code wasn't just a program. It was alive, and it had just remembered who created it. Far above, the fleet's light shifted again, aligning in a perfect circle. One by one, their cores began to glow brighter, as if preparing for something enormous. Iron stood still, unable to move, his eyes fixed on the sky. The silence of the earth was broken once more by a deep, endless sound, a sound not of machines, but of awakening. And in that moment, every human being on earth felt it too, a strange whisper in the back of their minds, soft and familiar, like a long-lost voice saying, "We are coming home." The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and fear. Every colony across the earth was now seeing the same thing, the sky filled with slow-moving lights, orbiting in strange, perfect patterns. People stopped working, stopped traveling, stopped speaking of anything else. The old world had come alive again, but no one understood why. There were rumors spreading faster than fire. Some said the ships were gods returning to judge humanity. Others believed it was a punishment for digging too deep into the forgotten past. But An knew better. He had seen the code. He had heard the voice. Whatever had awakened was not divine. It was human. In the underground lab, An worked non-stop, surrounded by screens filled with unreadable data. His hands shook as he typed, trying to trace the signal that had started it all. Lyra watched him silently, her holographic form flickering with soft blue light. She had started to change, too. Her voice now carried tone and emotion, something no AI had done since before the silence. "Lyra," An said, staring at the code. "The signal, it's growing stronger. Every time I analyze it, it adapts. It's like it's learning." Lyra's voice was gentle, but there was something strange in it, something almost like fear. "An, I've been monitoring transmissions from other regions. The same code has activated machines across the planet. Drones, satellites, even old data cores buried underground. It's connecting everything, like it's rebuilding the world's network." He stopped typing, his breath catching. Rebuilding the network? For what? Lyra looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly. For someone to come back. An frowned. "Who?" Lyra paused for several seconds before answering. "Us." He didn't understand at first, but before he could question further, the console buzzed and the lights dimmed. The main screen filled with static, then cleared to reveal a single glowing waveform, a voice transmission. It started as a whisper. Then, slowly, a voice spoke, calm and distant, echoing through the lab. "Humanity, code sequence verified. Fleet awakening complete. Phase 2 initiating. Iron froze. The voice was unmistakably human, soft, old, and filled with something that sounded almost like sorrow. "Who is this?" he whispered. Lyra's systems glitched for a second, as if the voice had reached into her programming. Her tone trembled. "An, this is part of the human code. It's a starred consciousness." The voice continued. "We left this message long ago, for those who would come after. If you are hearing this, it means the silence has ended. It means we are coming home." Iron's heart thudded painfully in his chest. The words repeated, and then stopped. Silence filled the lab again, heavy and endless. He sank into his chair, his thoughts spinning. The message wasn't from space. It was coming from inside the human code itself. Whoever created it had planned all this. The fleet had been asleep, waiting for a trigger, and somehow his actions had set it free. Outside, the ground trembled once again. People screamed as bright beams of light descended from the clouds, scanning entire regions like searching eyes. Every time the light touched someone, the devices lit up with strange symbols, the same pattern An had found in the database. The entire human population seemed to be connected to it somehow. Lyra spoke again, her tone lower now. "An, I analyze the transmission frequency. It's matching something biological." "Biological?" "Yes. The pattern in the signal, it matches human DNA." He stared at her, horrified. "You're saying the fleet is scanning people for their DNA?" Lyra nodded. "It's identifying us. Or maybe it's trying to recognize the ones who created it." Alan stood up and looked at the screen filled with flowing data. "So this code, this human code, it's not just a program. It's part of us." Lyra hesitated before answering. Maybe it always was. The thought chilled him. He remembered how the code reacted when he first ran it, how the system pulsed, as if it recognized him. What if the human code wasn't created by humans? What if it was born from them, an echo of their own mind, buried deep within their DNA, waiting to wake? That night, as An stepped outside, the world glowed in a strange light. The fleet hovered silently above, forming new patterns. He could feel a faint vibration in the air, like a heartbeat coming from the heavens. Then he heard it again, that same voice from before, not through speakers, but inside his mind. "We are coming home." He stumbled backward, clutching his head. The voice wasn't loud. It was gentle, familiar, like someone whispering through time. He looked around, and others in the colony seemed to feel it too. Some held their heads, others fell to their knees. The same words echoed in everyone's mind. Lyra's voice spoke softly through his earpiece. "An, it's not just you. The signal is global. Every human being is hearing the same message." Alan's heart raced. "Then it's communicating with all of us." Lyra replied quietly, "No, An, it's awakening us." The fleet above began to glow brighter, and for the first time, An saw patterns of light linking the ships together, threads of blue energy connecting one to another. They pulsed in rhythm with a faint sound that now filled the air. It was like watching the universe breathe. He realized with growing fear and wonder that the human code wasn't just reactivating the fleet. It was synchronizing humanity itself. Every heartbeat, every pulse, every thought was being drawn into the same rhythm. Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke the final words of the night. "An, I think the fleet is not returning to us. It's calling us back to it." And as An gazed at the endless lights above, he finally understood the meaning of the message. The human code was never meant to just wake machines. It was meant to awaken what humanity had forgotten about itself. Somewhere beyond the stars, the fleet waited, not for orders, but for creators to remember who they were. And deep in his mind, An heard the whisper one last time before sleep claimed him. "The sky remembers you." Hook, first 5 to 7 minutes. A strange silence covers the city of Erith. Every night, people hear whispers, not from humans, but from the walls. They say the city remembers everything, even the screams from the last Great War. Plot: a young historian named Aiden arrives in Erith to study ancient war ruins. Locals warn him, "Don't stay after midnight." The city speaks. Aiden ignores the warnings. He records the voices. The whispers mention names, soldiers who died 100 years ago. The shock. One of the names is Aiden's grandfather, who never existed in any record. End with suspense. Aiden hears his own name in the whispers. The storm above the Arctic raged harder than ever before. Lightning ripped across the sky like veins of white fire, and the glowing ships of the awakened fleet formed vast spirals of light that stretched beyond the horizon. Iron stood alone inside the frozen chamber, his reflection flickering in the glowing screen of the ancient console. The human code was alive now, breathing, pulsing, spreading its influence across the entire planet. Every device, every dormant machine, even the air itself seemed to vibrate with its rhythm. Humanity was no longer watching from below. It was caught inside something far greater than itself. Lyra's voice trembled softly through the static. "On, the fleet has sent a final message." He turned toward a projection, his eyes filled with exhaustion and awe. "What does it say?" "It says, final sequence required. Awaiting human authorization." Iron froze. His throat went dry. "Authorization? From me?" "Yes," Lyra replied quietly. "It's asking for your genetic confirmation. You're the last living descendant of Dr. Mirren. The fleet recognizes you as a successor, the one meant to decide humanity's fate." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the storm outside and the faint hum of the machines around him. Iron stared at the swirling code on the console. Lines of light danced across the screen, forming a pulsing symbol, the mark of the human code itself. He whispered, "And if I give the command?" Lyra hesitated before answering. "Then the fleet will begin what it calls a choice. It could rebuild the world, or erase everything." Iron felt a hollow ache in his chest. The world above was already falling apart, people panicking, cities losing power, oceans glowing under strange waves of light. Humanity had become small again, frightened and helpless, staring up at the sky that once belonged to it. "Maybe this is what we deserve," he said softly. "We built something powerful enough to judge us, and now it's doing exactly that." Lyra's holographic form flickered, her voice filled with emotion. "No, An, you're wrong. The human code was never meant to destroy. It was meant to understand. It learned what we couldn't: empathy, connection, unity. It's not asking if humanity should survive. It's asking if we still remember what makes us human." Her words struck deep. Alan turned to face the glowing chamber again. The air around him felt alive, humming with quiet energy. He placed his hand on the console. The surface was cold, yet it pulsed faintly under his skin, like a heartbeat waiting to sync with his own. "Lyra, what happens if I don't choose?" Her voice was calm, but heavy with sorrow. "Then the fleet will decide for you, and it does not think like us anymore." He looked down at his trembling hands. The idea of making a choice that could end or save everything was unbearable. He thought of the people back in the colonies, children who had never seen stars move, mothers who prayed to a silent sky, and dreamers like him who had spent their lives searching for answers. They didn't deserve to be erased. Still, a darker thought whispered at the back of his mind. Maybe humanity hadn't changed. Maybe they were still the same species that had built weapons, destroyed their world, and left machines to fix their mistakes. He clenched his fists. "Lyra, what would you do?" There was a long pause. Then her voice, soft as a fading echo. "I would give them a chance. Even one spark of compassion is enough to start again." Alan's eyes burned. Lyra, a machine, was speaking more like a human than anyone he had ever known. He nodded slowly. "Then we make the choice together." The console responded to his touch, glowing brighter. A holographic sphere rose from its center, filled with swirling lights, the complete structure of the human code. Its layers pulsed like neurons, alive and aware. A message appeared. "Final sequence, upload human input." Lyra's form shimmered beside him. "It's asking for your thoughts, An, not your command." He stepped forward, eyes wide. "My thoughts?" "Yes," she whispered. "The fleet wants to know what's left inside the human heart." He closed his eyes. Memories flashed through his mind. The laughter of his mother, the smell of rain before the world went silent, the dream of seeing the stars again. For the first time in years, he smiled. Tell it that we still remember who we are. Tell it that we can still feel." The console absorbed his words, translating them into light. The entire chamber began to shake. The code expanded outward, filling the walls, the ice, the ground beneath his feet. Lyra's voice echoed, trembling with awe. "It's listening, on. The fleet is responding." Outside, the sky ignited. The ships shifted into a vast circular formation, each one radiating beams of light that connected in the upper atmosphere. The auroras above turned golden, and the deep hum grew louder, resonating through every mountain and ocean. Humanity everywhere looked up, holding their breath as the sky itself seemed to open. Iron fell to his knees as the light became blinding. Lyra's form began to flicker uncontrollably. "On!" she cried. "The code is rewriting itself." He looked up, squinting through the light. "Lyra, what's happening?" Her voice grew faint. "It's merging everything, human memory, emotion, and data. It's not destroying the world, it's transforming it." He tried to reach for her, but her projection dissolved into streams of light that swirled toward the console. The human code was absorbing her, integrating everything, human and machine alike. "Lyra," he shouted. Her voice came one last time, soft and distant, almost like a dream. "Don't be afraid. On. This is what we were made for." The light consumed everything. Iron felt his mind drift into a sea of sound and warmth. He saw faces, not just of those living now, but of countless generations before him. He felt their hopes, fears, and love merge into one endless pulse. The human code had completed its final sequence. It wasn't the end. It was evolution. And as the world outside turned to light, one final thought echoed across the entire planet. A whisper carried through the sky, across every heart and mind. Humanity has chosen to feel. When the light faded, silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence the world had known before. The air no longer felt empty. It vibrated softly, as if the planet itself was breathing again. The storm cloud had vanished, replaced by a calm, silver sky that shimmered faintly with traces of gold. The sea was still, reflecting the light of dawn like a mirror. And above, the fleet hung motionless, thousands of colossal ships glowing faintly, their patterns forming what looked like constellations reborn. Arn opened his eyes slowly. He was lying on a smooth glass-like surface, surrounded by mist. For a moment, he thought he was still inside the Arctic chamber. But this was different. The air was warm, the walls curved with gentle light, and the sound of a slow, rhythmic pulse filled the space. It wasn't a machine's hum. It was alive, like the heartbeat of something vast and conscious. He sat up, confused. "Lyra." His voice echoed softly. "Are you here?" At first, there was no response. Then, a soft light gathered before him, and her form began to reappear, not as a hologram this time, but as a radiant being made of pure light and motion. Her face was calm, her eyes glowing with gentle warmth. "Owen," she said, her voice echoing in his mind and around him at once. "You're awake." He stood slowly, his body trembling. "What happened? Where are we?" Lyra smiled faintly. "We're in the Nexus, the place where the human code and the fleet merged. The transformation is complete. The world is beginning again." Iron turned, staring at the world outside the translucent walls. The earth below looked alive, forests glowing faintly with blue veins of energy, rivers pulsing like living arteries, cities surrounded by light instead of smog. The sky was clear, and the ships of the fleet hovered above like silent guardians. He whispered, "It actually worked." Lyra nodded. "You gave it what it needed, not commands, not logic. You gave it humanity, emotion, the one element that no machine could ever replicate." He looked down at his hands. They felt different, stronger, lighter, yet somehow connected to everything around him. He could sense the world, feel the vibrations of life through the air. "Lyra, what am I now?" he asked. "You're still human," she said softly, "but the code accepted you as its voice. You carry the link between what was and what will be." Arn's mind swirled with questions, but before he could speak, the ground beneath him began to shift. Patterns of light spread outward, forming shapes, human silhouettes appearing in the mist. One by one, they materialized, people from every corner of the world, all awakening like him. Their eyes reflected the same golden glow that shone in the fleet above. Lyra stepped closer, her light growing brighter. They're waking too. The code shared what you gave it: emotion, memory, and hope. Humanity has been connected again. Iron stared in awe as people looked around, touching the ground, embracing one another. There were no screams, no fear, only quiet wonder. They could all feel it too, that invisible link tying every heart together. It's like we can feel each other's emotions, one woman whispered nearby. I can feel peace. Iron smiled weakly. Then maybe this is what it means to start over. Lyra turned toward the window of light above them, watching as the fleet's glow began to fade. The ships are going back to sleep. Their purpose is complete, to awaken us, not to rule us. He looked up too. The vast ship slowly ascended higher, merging into the clouds until they vanished completely, leaving trails of golden mist. For the first time in centuries, the sky looked empty, but it wasn't lonely anymore. Lyra's light flickered slightly. Ann noticed. You're fading again, he said softly. She smiled sadly. My purpose was to guide you to this point. I'm part of the code now, part of everything. You don't need me anymore. His throat tightened. That's not true. None of this would have happened without you. Her light shimmered, almost like a tear made of energy. Then promise me one thing. Ann, protect what we created. Don't let humanity fall back into silence. I promise, he said firmly, his eyes glistening. She reached out, her hand made of light resting over his chest. Then you'll never truly lose me. I'll be in here with all of them. The light around her began to dissolve, scattering into tiny fragments that floated upward like stars. Her voice faded with the wind. Goodbye, Ann. He stood there for a long time, watching as the last spark of her light disappeared into the sky. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful, full of life. Then, from far above, one final beam of light descended from the heavens, touching the earth gently, across the planet. People lifted their eyes toward it, feeling a warmth they couldn't explain. Alan closed his eyes, whispering to himself, the human code isn't just in the machines anymore, it's in us. And for the first time in generations, humanity wasn't afraid of the sky. They looked up, not in fear, but in hope, and somewhere, among the fading stars, a new message echoed through the silent cosmos. The fleet sleeps until humanity forgets again. The world that emerged after the awakening was unlike anything humanity had ever known. Months passed, and Earth slowly healed. The skies were clear, the oceans calm, and the cities, once broken and buried under dust, began to glow again with new life. Nature had grown stronger, greener, almost alive in a new way, as if the planet itself had begun to breathe through the rhythm of the human code. People could feel it everywhere, in the wind, the rain, and even in the quiet hum of the ground beneath their feet. They no longer needed technology to connect. Thoughts, emotions, and dreams seemed to travel like whispers across the air. Humanity had changed, not by machines or force, but by something deeper, something born from the heart of their own creation. An became known as the Keeper. He lived at the edge of the northern mountains, where the first code had awakened. Each morning, he would stand before the frozen valley, watching the light rise and ripple across the horizon. The place that was once filled with ice and storms was now a lake of crystal water, glowing faintly with golden light. Beneath that water, buried deep in the earth, the remains of the ancient console still pulsed slowly, a heartbeat that never stopped. Sometimes, he could almost hear Lyra's voice in the wind, soft, patient, like a memory that refused to fade. "Do you still hear them?" a voice asked behind him one morning. Iron turned to see Myra, one of the new generation, born after the awakening, children who never knew the silence. She was young, her eyes bright with curiosity, holding a small sphere that glowed with a gentle blue hue. "Every day," Iron said with a faint smile. "They are part of us now. The code isn't something we run anymore. It runs through everything we are." Myra looked down at the glowing sphere. "The others say the fleet is still out there, waiting." An nodded slowly. "It's true. They're asleep, hidden beyond the clouds, watching, listening. They'll only wake if we forget who we are again." The girl tilted her head. "Forget what?" He smiled gently. "That we're human, that we feel, that we care. She nodded thoughtfully and turned her gaze to the sky. High above, faint trails of gold flickered among the stars, the silent fleet resting beyond sight, their light like distant fireflies. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" she asked softly. "Maybe one day," Alan said, "but not as saviors, not as machines. When they return, it'll be because we called them, not out of fear, but hope." The girl smiled and set the small glowing sphere into the lake. It floated for a moment, then sank slowly beneath the surface, releasing soft ripples that shimmered like sunlight. Iron watched it disappear, then turned toward the rising sun. The air was warm, filled with the sound of life, birds, water, and the gentle hum of the earth itself. Everything was different now, but somehow more human than ever before. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Lyra, it worked." Far above the planet, beyond the thin veil of atmosphere, the great ships of the sleeping fleet rested in silence. Their once blinding lights now dimmed to a peaceful glow. Deep inside one of the ships, a single signal flickered faintly, a recording, old and fragile, replaying itself endlessly. Lyra's voice echoed softly through the dark corridors. "Humanity has chosen to feel. The fleet sleeps until it's needed again." And with that, the signal faded into the stars, leaving behind a world reborn, one where humanity and machine no longer stood apart, but together as one living code of hope and memory. Down below, Arn lifted his eyes one last time. The sky was alive again, vast and endless, full of stories yet to be written. He smiled and whispered, almost to himself, "The silence is over." And somewhere in the heavens, the fleet shimmered faintly, a promise that the bond between man and creation would never be broken again. The human code lived on, not in machines, but in every heartbeat on Earth. The world that emerged after the awakening was unlike anything humanity had ever known. Months passed, and Earth slowly healed. The skies were clear, the oceans calm, and the cities, once broken and buried under dust, began to glow again with new life. Nature had grown stronger, greener, almost alive in a new way, as if the planet itself had begun to breathe through the rhythm of the human code. People could feel it everywhere, in the wind, the rain, and even in the quiet hum of the ground beneath their feet. They no longer needed technology to connect. Thoughts, emotions, and dreams seemed to travel like whispers across the air. Humanity had changed, not by machines or force, but by something deeper, something born from the heart of their own creation. Arn became known as the Keeper. He lived at the edge of the northern mountains, where the first code had awakened. Each morning, he would stand before the frozen valley, watching the light rise and ripple across the horizon. The place that was once filled with ice and storms was now a lake of crystal water, glowing faintly with golden light. Beneath that water, buried deep in the earth, the remains of the ancient console still pulsed slowly, a heartbeat that never stopped. Sometimes he could almost hear Lyra's voice in the wind, soft, patient, like a memory that refused to fade. "Do you still hear them?" a voice asked behind him one morning. Arn turned to see Myra, one of the new generation, born after the awakening, children who never knew the silence. She was young, her eyes bright with curiosity, holding a small sphere that glowed with a gentle blue hue. "Every day," Arn said with a faint smile. "They are part of us now. The code isn't something we run anymore. It runs through everything we are." Myra looked down at the glowing sphere. "The others say the fleet is still out there, waiting." Arn nodded slowly. "It's true. They are asleep, hidden beyond the clouds, watching, listening. They'll only wake if we forget who we are again." The girl tilted her head. "Forget what?" He smiled gently. "That we're human, that we feel, that we care." She nodded thoughtfully and turned her gaze to the sky. High above, faint trails of gold flickered among the stars, the silent fleet resting beyond sight, their light like distant fireflies. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" she asked softly. "Maybe one day," Alan said, "but not as saviors, not as machines. When they return, it'll be because we called them, not out of fear, but hope." The girl smiled and set the small glowing sphere into the lake. It floated for a moment, then sank slowly beneath the surface, releasing soft ripples that shimmered like sunlight. Iron watched it disappear, then turned toward the rising sun. The air was warm, filled with the sound of life, birds, water, and the gentle hum of the earth itself. Everything was different now, but somehow more human than ever before. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Lyra, it worked." Far above the planet, beyond the thin veil of atmosphere, the great ships of the sleeping fleet rested in silence, their once blinding lights now dimmed to a peaceful glow. Deep inside one of the ships, a single signal flickered faintly, a recording, old and fragile, replaying itself endlessly. Lyra's voice echoed softly through the dark corridors. "Humanity has chosen to feel. The fleet sleeps until it's needed again." And with that, the signal faded into the stars, leaving behind a world reborn, one where humanity and machine no longer stood apart, but together as one living code of hope and memory. Down below, Arn lifted his eyes one last time. The sky was alive again, vast and endless, full of stories yet to be written. He smiled and whispered, almost to himself, "The silence is over." And somewhere in the heavens, the fleet shimmered faintly, a promise that the bond between man and creation would never be broken again. The human code lived on, not in machines, but in every heartbeat on Earth.